Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. All right, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. How are you getting on?
Not bad at all. Straight into it. No mucking about. What have you been playing this week, Lewis?
No mucking about.
No chit chat on this show.
No chit chat. Yeah, we're
straight to the games.
Serious, Mark, this week. Good grief. I have just been playing Nier Automata, which I mentioned that I'd started last week. I've not, to be totally honest, I've not played tons more of it, but put in another couple of hours maybe. It's clicking with me, I would say.
Oh, nice.
I'm
so pleased.
There's still a lot that I've kind of been told about it by evangelists like yourself and a few other pals who are really into it that I've not been feeling yet. Like, one of the things that people always mention is how great the combat is, and so far to me the combat is kind of just bash and square. Like, there isn't a lot more to it than that, and I feel like I get hit all the time, but I'm not sure if that's kind of normal, or maybe I'm just not dodging enough or something. But yeah, just had some more. It's more the feel of it and the tone of it and the sort of. I mean, the story hasn't even developed very far yet, so I couldn't really say that the story is what's really gripping me just now. But there's enough little hooks that have kept me kind of going, okay, this is interesting at least. Like, I want to know a bit more about what's happening in this world. So I've now, like, I'm going to spoil some minor stuff at the start of the game. I suppose this is all still within the first few hours, really. But I've fought a kind of crazy naked android thing that all the machines got together and spawned out of the sky. And, like, then when it died, it kind of just spawned a second one and started doing some mad howling. And that was all a bit of a trip. And I was at the end of that sequence, I was kind of like, okay, fucking hell, like, what is this game exactly? And I like how there was a moment just when 2B and, is it 9S, yeah, I'll never commit any of those to memory. 2B and 9S are talking to one another, but they are kind of trying to work out what the hell they've just experienced. And I sort of thought to myself, like, oh, this is a bit like a detective game or something. Like, these two buddies are out in the world trying to, like obviously they've been sent in with a mission, but they're encountering stuff that they can't really explain. And particularly when they start to encounter kind of robots who are fearful of them and kind of pretending to have babies and stuff like that. There's some weird, like, imitation of human life stuff going on there that suddenly, as the player behind these characters, I'm sat there going, what the hell is going on here? And they are asking each other the same questions in a way that is obviously interesting for their own sentience, because they're androids and they probably shouldn't really be thinking that any of this is possible or meaningful or anything. And so yeah, all of that stuff, I'm just kind of like, okay. I don't know if I like love the game yet, but I'm certainly not put off by anything that I've experienced thus far. Some great big set piece moments and stuff as well, which is great as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've immediately globbed onto what you should have done, which is continually ask yourself, what is this game? Because I guarantee your answer to that will probably change as the playthrough progresses, or as the multiple playthroughs progress in your case, Liz. But that's the thing, is that you sort of have to do that to get to the heart of the game in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Is in that repetitiveness of, well, the first two runs anyway, the third and the fourth ones are different, but yeah, I'm so glad that you're at least enjoying playing it. Do you know what I mean? I have to say as well, by the way, like, I don't remember the combat being like all singing, all dancing or anything like that. Like, it was totally fine. I think I pretty much enjoyed it at the time. I remember having to hold the controller rather weirdly because it's all shoulder buttons. So you basically have to be using all the shoulder buttons all the time, if I remember correctly.
Pretty much, yeah.
But it was the atmosphere, it was the story that was taking place, it was getting really interesting as the game progressed and things like that. That is what hooked me onto the game. That's why I loved the game. It wasn't the combat or anything like that. Although it was totally fine. It was completely satisfactory combat, but that wasn't the reason why I thought it was brilliant, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to kind of uncovering a bit more. I've barely kind of scratched the surface yet, I feel like, so there's obviously quite a lot to go. But that's another thing, like just within the first couple of hours, it's really kind of set the scene, which is great, you know, because a lot of games hold that shit back for so long these days, you know. A couple of hours in and I'm going, okay, what the fuck? So yeah, keen to see more.
Exactly. It's not you're 10 hours in and then suddenly we've got to the first main outpost of the mission or whatever, you know.
Yeah, the splash screen. Yeah, oh my god. Anyway, Mark, what have you been playing this week?
Well, Lewis, I very deliberately haven't been playing very much this week. I feel as though 2022 has been a heavy year for video games. Basically, I've played almost exclusively big RPGs, it's felt like. I started the year by playing Horizon, then I went immediately into Elden Ring, then I went into playing... I played Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle after that, which was a nice little break, I must admit. But then it was sort of into the very serious Gears Tactics again after that. Then it was Triangle Strategy after that again, which was just another big game. Obviously, most of the year has been taken up playing Elden Ring. But it's just felt like a lot, like games have felt on top of me, and in a year where it's actually been quite quiet and not a lot of stuff is released, that's sort of self-inflicted on my part a little bit, I have to say. So I've just been like, no, this week you're taking it easy, you're going to play the PlayAlong games, which we'll get to at the end of the podcast, and that will be enough and you'll be happy with that. And to be honest with you, I've been playing Clap Hands Golf on my phone, which has been great, just on the couch pretending to watch TV at the same time. That's all I've been doing this week, very deliberately. And I think that taking wee breaks like that, like if you're gaming and you're not enjoying it, that's a problem. I don't like that. Like I want to be excited to go and play a video game, do you know what I mean? And it got to the point, I think, a little bit where I was like, oh, well, I need to get through Triangle Strategy. Oh, I need to get through Elden Ring. Oh, I need to get through Horizon. Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to feel like that all the time, you know? I want to be excited to sit down and play something. And I feel that taking a break just is a wee bit of a reset and sort of like gets me excited to go and do that again. So I'm hoping that by the end of this week, in fact, it almost certainly will be by the end of this week, because I'm already like, oh, I'm wanting to play something else now. And I just wasn't like that before. Do you know what I mean? It felt obligatory in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I just think that taking breaks like this, taking deliberate breaks, just being like, no, I'm actually not going to start something new this week, I'm just going to relax and take it easy, is actually quite good for me personally. And if anyone else feels like video games are getting on top of you, or you feel as though you're gaming and not having fun, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more, to be honest. I mean, certainly everything that you're saying there about Elden Ring, mainly, for me, you know, felt like it was really on top of me this year and dominated all of my time. And like, that is the thing, you've got to remember that this is a hobby more than anything else. It's a passion and all that, and there can be even when there's not a big game like Elden Ring that's burnt you out necessarily, sometimes you're just like, I just have other stuff going on, I've got other interests, I've got other things I want to do in my life. So there might be some weeks where you just take a step back. I mean, we don't talk about it a lot on this show, but I actually probably spend more time, or have done post Elden Ring, just playing like Wii games on my phone, like daft crossword games and stuff like that on my phone while watching TV, than I have like really sinking into something. Whereas like post Elden Ring, when I jumped into Stray, it was very much like, I'm dying to play that, I really want to give this a go, and I just kind of sunk the hours in and finished it. And obviously it helped that I knew how short that was going to be, but I really think there's something quite profound in that idea that if you are playing something and you're sitting there going, I actually don't really want to play this, but I just feel like I ought to because I've paid my $40 for it or whatever, step away from it. There's just so much out there to be doing, you know? Yeah,
absolutely. I didn't mention it either, but I've also been playing Minesweeper on my phone, the old MS like games game, basically, that came free with Windows XP and all that even before. Yeah, I've been playing that quite a lot as well, which is great fun. And I've been playing that since lockdown, really, so that's really stuck. And on that weird note, time for the news. All right, news item number 1. PlayStation have increased the price of the PS5 in most of its major markets, which really fucking sucks, Lewis. The PS5 will now cost €50 more in the EU. It will cost £30 more here in the UK. It will cost 5,000 yen more in Japan. It will cost 400 yuan more in China. It will cost $50 more in Australia. It will cost 1,000 pesos more in Mexico, and it will cost $20 more in Canada. That constitutes a price rise of between 6% and 12.5% roughly. The UK has actually got away pretty lightly here with an only 6% increase, but not as lightly as the US, Lewis, who have managed to avoid a pay increase at all. It seems that this might be to do with the comparatively strong US dollar right now, but if I were someone in the US, I would not be clutching onto that victory very tight, because I could easily see there being an increase in the very, very near future. PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan has said this regarding the price increase.
The global economic environment is a challenge that many of you around the world are no doubt experiencing. We're seeing high global inflation rates as well as adverse currency trends impacting consumers and creating pressures on many industries. Based on these challenging economic conditions, SIE has made the difficult decision to increase the recommended retail price of PlayStation 5 in select markets across Europe, the Middle East and Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, as well as Canada. There will be no price increase in the United States. While this price increase is a necessity given the current global economic environment and its impact on SIE's business, our top priority continues to be improving the PS5 supply situation so that as many players as possible can experience everything that PS5 offers and what's still to come.
It's worth pointing out that both Microsoft and Nintendo have confirmed that they do not intend to increase the price of the Series X or the Switch, respectively. And while industry analysts such as Piers Harding Rolls have said that the price increase will have a minimal impact on the PS5 sales, in reality, this amount of money increase is probably not going to break the bank for most people who are able to buy a PlayStation in the first place. We are staring down the barrel of another global recession. We are in the worst cost of living crisis in living memory. The supply issues continue to be a problem for PlayStation, and people struggle to get a PlayStation 5 even if they could have afforded it back then. All of this just adds up to a shitty situation, and this price increase just fucking sucks, man. It's just not great, you know?
Oh, it's definitely not great, no.
Not great. Didn't really know how else to phrase that, but not great was probably quite light on how much I think this is shit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two sides to this. Like, first of all, it is shit. It's shit as a gamer, as a consumer in the gaming space that this is happening, and it's particularly shit that it's only happening to everyone outside the US. Like, even the fact that Jim Ryan sort of declared that within his statement feels a little odd to me, because it's sort of, I mean, the price has even gone up in Canada, and I get that there's maybe a slightly better economic picture or whatever in the US, but it does feel...
It only went up $20 in Canada as well. It went up the least, I think, of anyone.
I mean, what is...
Because the situation's better in North America.
Sure. But, like, I don't see why adding $20, like, how necessary is that really in the grand scheme of things? We've talked a lot about how...
I mean, across millions of sales, man.
Sure,
I mean,
like,
probably a lot.
They'll make money that way,
for
absolutely.
Shareholders.
But we were always told that the console makers lose money on hardware and make it up on software. So are they really that concerned over another $20 lost? Like, I find that hard to imagine, really. So it does feel a little bit like a cash grab, potentially. And I do wonder to what extent the decision not to do it in the US is kind of about Xbox and how strong it can perform in the US in comparison to most other territories. Like, obviously it does fine in other parts of North America and in Europe and stuff, but, like, Xbox is never going to increase the cost of the Xbox in Japan, say, because they can't really afford to do that. But they could probably drop the price in the States, you know what I mean? And if Sony have gone up, blah blah blah, there's a whole piece there. But I think the flip side of this is that it's actually indicative of where the world is right now, and it's quite a scary place we find ourselves in. I mean, like you say, if you're the kind of person who can scrape together the money to buy a PS5 just now, then you can probably afford the extra, whatever it is, 40 quid in this country, or whatever it might be, wherever you are. But that's, assuming that you can afford the electricity that it's going to take to turn the fucking thing on. So
well, yeah, that is becoming a real concern.
Yeah, we're in a really bad place right now globally. I think Jim Ryan's like fairly euphemistic opener to that. The global economic environment is a challenge that many of you around the world are no doubt experiencing. Like, how gently can you say, like, we're absolutely fucked, the whole world is, and and they're reacting to that. But I don't think it's a great look that they have made this move, kind of coming on the back of the Meta Oculus price increase that they announced, which didn't go down well, the Meta Quest, sorry.
No, but that was proportionally a significantly bigger increase. I think it was like nearly 20%.
Yeah, they added like $100 to that or something, didn't they? So yeah,
it was nonsense. Yeah,
but like to follow that up with their own and then have your biggest kind of rivals in the hardware space say, well, we're not doing that, it leaves questions open to PlayStation, I think. But yeah, you said, I think a couple of weeks ago, Mark, that I think it's important to reinforce here that Like, buying a PlayStation 5 should not be anyone's chief concern when the economy is like this. And, be careful about any of this stuff. If, gaming is not the most important thing in anyone's life, really. I think that's worth saying again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with that sentiment. And to be honest with you, if a 6 to 12% price increase is put it out of your budget, I would dare say you probably shouldn't have been buying one in the first place. You know what I mean? And right now, in the current economic environment, I think that 450 quid or nearly 500 quid now for a PlayStation could probably be better spent elsewhere. And to be completely frank, if the economic situation were like this when I was thinking about buying a PlayStation back last year, I might not have bought one. Exactly. I might have been like, this money would be better spent elsewhere. I think that me and Euless have got incredibly fortunate, not only to be able to get one, but to be able to get one and feel that it was a justifiable call.
Totally.
Whereas right now, spending that money on a bit of hardware, granted on something that could bring you a lot of joy, but at the same time, like, sensibly, I think that money for a lot of people, and I very much include myself in this, like, could be better spent elsewhere. Right now, I mean, Jesus Christ, almost certainly. So yeah, it's definitely a reflection of the times that we're in. But yeah, if you're someone that is a big concern for, I would highly recommend not to buying a PlayStation. Alright, listeners, item number 2, and in what has been a bad couple of weeks for PlayStation, they are also facing a £5 billion lawsuit alleging that they have ripped off customers. The lawsuit has been introduced in the UK by a customer rights campaigner, Alex Neil. This all basically comes down to PlayStation taking the 30% cut that they do from digital purchases on the PlayStation Store. It is worth pointing out that while I think the 30% is basically bullshit, it is the industry standard. Steam, Xbox, Nintendo, Apple, Google, they all charge 30% for digital sales on their respective storefronts. The only exception is Epic, who take a variable amount up to about 12%. None of that is to say that I think the 30% cut is good or right. It is just what everyone does, and PlayStation just happens to be in the crosshairs at this particular time. This is also basically the same reason why Epic sued Apple a few years back. That said, if the lawsuit is won, everyone who has bought a game or DLC or anything from the PlayStation Store since August the 19th, 2016 would be entitled to anywhere between £67 and £562 in damages. And for people like you and me, Lewis, who might have spent quite a lot of money over that period, we might be in for a small windfall, which would be quite nice. Alex Neil has said this regarding the lawsuit.
The game is up for Sony PlayStation. With this legal action, I'm standing up for the millions of UK people who've been unwittingly overcharged. We believe Sony has abused its position and ripped off its customers. Gaming is now the biggest entertainment industry in the UK, ahead of TV, video and music, and many vulnerable people rely on gaming for community and connection. The actions of Sony is costing millions of people who can't afford it, particularly when we're in the midst of a cost of living crisis and the consumer purse is being squeezed like never before. Natasha Pearman, the partner leading the case, also added, Sony dominates the digital distribution of PlayStation games and in-game content. It has deployed an anti-competitive strategy which has resulted in excessive prices to customers that are out of all proportion to the costs of Sony providing its services.
It is also worth noting that Sony successfully got a US court to throw out another lawsuit along the same lines, also accusing PlayStation of anti-competition and having a monopoly and all that stuff. So not sure what the likelihood of this lawsuit being successful actually is, but it seems more and more that these storefronts, these digital storefronts, are coming under a lot of pressure to reduce the amount of money that they are taking away from developers and subsequently that is then being passed on to consumers. Because it does seem to be out of all proportion to the actual service they are providing. You know, basically you're just paying to get onto their locked platform. That's all it is.
Yeah, this is I think a bit of a strange one overall, Mark. I mean, There definitely is an argument within all of this, same as there was with the Epic and Apple situation about anti-competition and about essentially locking other people out of the marketplace. But I don't think there's a chance in hell of this succeeding. I don't really see how the case even kind of has a leg to stand on, given that it is the industry norm and is not unusual, is happening in all sorts of other ways, and can kind of broadly be applied to all sorts of other fields as well. It's not just gaming or software even that does this. I mean, it's just what they're talking about essentially is commission, and they're claiming that commission or a percentage take on a sale is unfair to the consumer. But particularly in this case, I think you're only gated because you bought into the PlayStation ecosystem. There's a myriad of other options to play video games on, so I can't see this kind of going anywhere. But it's good that
neither, but
people
I think
are challenging
the point
it.
Here, I think the point here is to challenge the industry standard, though, right? As I was saying, PlayStation are in the crosshairs right now. But I think that the point here is to challenge the industry standard, because in reality, the 30% that they take is vastly disproportional to the amount of money or effort that they put into their storefront, I would argue quite strongly. And judging by the way that indie developers and things like that speak about PlayStation, I think a lot of people would argue that. So I think that it's good that this has been challenged. Do I think that this will be successful? Almost certainly fucking not. But I think that it's good that it's been challenged, and maybe if more and more challenges keep happening in more and more different countries to more and more different storefronts, whether it be Apple, whether it be PlayStation, whether it's Xbox, Nintendo, pick your fucking poison, you know what I mean? I think that there has to be a precedent set where we are actually saying, like, this is completely unreasonable how much money you're taking for the amount of effort that you're putting into this storefront. And while we are buying into your ecosystem, we expect fair prices as consumers. And you don't get to, gate us in, I suppose, to an environment where we physically cannot get access to good prices because you're making that impossible. I don't really know how that stands up legally, but ethically, I think that is exactly what should be happening.
Yeah, ethically, you're spot on. I mean, ethically, there should be all sorts of competing storefronts available on any of these platforms so that you can pick and choose. I mean, this goes back to, if anyone wants to dig into the old PlayerStoo archives, we've had this conversation endlessly, particularly around
Apple,
Well, around Apple, but also when Game, the major game retail outlet here in the UK, was going out of business and was being bought and stuff, like way back to our earliest episodes, we were talking about like the death of the physical market is a problem in terms of consumer power because you cannot get access to any other options in the digital space, and PlayStation just routinely don't really reduce their pricing for old games. I mean, maybe because looking at all this, I mean, they're mixing messages here about anti-competition and also about consumers being ripped off, i.e. you're setting too high a commission rate and you're not giving anyone any options to go anywhere else, right? You're not going to change that second point. PlayStation is not going to be forced to put another rival storefront into the PlayStation OS. But what we might be able to do is change that percentage. Is it really going to have that much of an impact on the consumer? I don't know. But if there's anything that could be done to say, for example, Sony can only charge, or any of these platform holders could only charge 30% commission for the first year that a title is available, and then they have to drop their commission rate because if that game was available in stores physically, its price would have dropped in this time,
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, the death of the physical space is a big deal now more than ever because the physical space is tied directly to the second-hand market as well, which a lot of people right now will probably want to take advantage of rather than paying $70 or 60 quid here in the UK for a video game. They can get that at often a fraction of the price on the second-hand market. And the more and more that market goes away, the more and more we're forced onto these digital storefronts, which do charge a hell of a lot of money.
Well, exactly. And particularly when they're selling us boxes that don't have disc drives in them. So all of that option is getting removed, So yeah, it's all stuff to be wary of, but I don't imagine this case is going to change it overnight,
No, me neither, but let's hope it does, Lewis. Let's hope it does.
Power to them.
All right, news item number 3, and still sticking with PlayStation. PlayStation have officially moved into the mobile development space after purchasing mobile devs Savage Games. PlayStation Studios head Herman Hulst made the announcement on the PlayStation blog and immediately started preempting negativity around the purchase. He said this regarding the announcement.
As we assured you before with our plans to bring select titles to PC, our efforts beyond console in no way diminish our commitment to the PlayStation community nor our passion to keep making amazing single-player, narrative-driven experiences. Our mobile gaming efforts will be similarly additive, providing more ways for more people to engage with our content and striving to reach new audiences unfamiliar with PlayStation and our games. Savage Game Studios is joining a newly created PlayStation Studios mobile division, which will operate independently from our console development and focus on innovative, on-the-go experiences based on new and existing PlayStation IP.
Savage Games are actually a pretty new studio. They were only created in 2020, but are made up of veterans of the mobile dev industry. So it sounds like a very similar situation to me, like with Haven Studios, in that they are a relatively new studio but made up of veterans and people that PlayStation believe in, basically. However, Hulst did say that Savage are working on a new unannounced AAA mobile live service action game. This is pretty much in line with what Jim Ryan had said repeatedly in the past, that they were looking to expand into PC, which they've done. They're looking to expand into mobile, which they have now done, and that they are looking to add more live service games to their lineup, which they have now done many times over, it sounds like. This purchase seems to be the last piece of that puzzle a little bit, and it also ticks the live service box. Lewis, firstly, what are your thoughts on this purchase? And secondly, do you agree that the term AAA mobile game is an oxymoron?
Yeah, I probably do agree with that latter part. I mean, I'm interested to see what a company like PlayStation moving into this space will create, or what they will try to create, and what...
I reckon they'll create mobile games, mate.
Sure. But are they going to go for? Are they going to go for something that breaks the mold, or are they? So I asked this question on Twitter the other day, right? Like, which PlayStation IP would you want to see? And kind of the comments we got back were basically like, this character in an endless runner, and this is the sentiment I've seen around this whole discussion. Really, is just like, it's like the only mobile games that are around are just like Temple Run clones, or stuff like that, like just Flappy Bird but with Kratos' face on. And that's just not necessarily...
My God, I would play that so fucking hard.
That's like not really necessarily the case. AAA maybe not, but like, yeah, I'm keen to see what that could mean. This story overall, like, yeah, it seems inevitable that PlayStation were going to do this. They basically said they were going to do it. There's not a lot of surprise there. Interested to see what this game that they're talking about that Savage might be making could be. I mean, it has basically got every marketing buzzword attached to it, as you were reading out there, but to me, like, I don't really get any of the backlash to this. It's so interesting that Herman Hulst has to come out. It's like PTSD lingers in the PlayStation Studios hallways, because it's like they've got to anytime anything happens, they've got to come out and say, we promise we're still making single player narrative driven experiences. We've got to constantly reassure everyone of that, because they've just been hounded so feverishly over the last few years to not move away from that. But I think this is fine. This is not going to affect console development. What I hope it isn't is just like, as I was saying there, I hope it's not just reskinned crap versions of mobile games but with PlayStation IP attached to it. I hope they do some smart stuff with it and maybe introduce some new IP altogether.
Well, it sounds like that's what they're doing, right? Yeah. It sounds like they're making a new IP. Don't get me wrong, mobile AAA or not, live action game is doing absolutely nothing for me whatsoever. But I mean, it does sound as if they're bringing their own ideas to the table here, right? It's not just that we're going to take Ratchet and Clank or Kratos or Ellie from The Last of Us and put them into a mobile game or whatever. It's like, no, we've brought in a studio of veterans who know what they're doing here to make a game. Do you know what I mean? And I think that that's the way to go about it if you're going to go about this. So yeah, basically I didn't really understand what the uproar was about either. If you want to move into mobile, fine. They've bought a new studio to do that specifically. Sony Santa Monica, Naughty Dog are not going to be churning out mobile games anytime soon, I don't think.
And if you're not interested in mobile games from these studios, just ignore them. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I'll be doing.
It doesn't, you don't. It doesn't affect your like PlayStation credibility if you've not played these. It's fine.
Alright, let's news item number 4. The UK competition regulators, the CMA, their inquiry into the Xbox Activision deal may be getting expanded. Apparently, the CMA have been gathering feedback from third parties that are interested in the proposed deal. So similarly to what the Brazilian Trade Commission had been doing, which we'd spoken about a couple of weeks back, this apparently had a deadline for September the 1st, which is actually the day this podcast comes out. However, according to Seeking Alpha, who cited a Capital Form report, Seeking Alpha being a financial open source content service and Capital Form are an investigative financial news organisation. I don't know anything about any of them. I don't know anything about any of their credentials. That's why I'm saying that. However, they said that the CMA have had a quote-unquote issues meeting with Microsoft to express concerns over the deal, which could result in the CMA expanding their review. Now, what this doesn't mean is that the acquisition is on shaky ground or anything like that. I imagine what the CMA wanted was assurances around exclusivity, particularly around Call of Duty. And if what Xbox are saying publicly about exclusivity is true, then I don't really think this is going to cause much of a problem. I sort of suspect it might be the CMA dotting the I's and crossing the T's in a lot of ways here. This also does come in the same week as Phil Spencer did an interview with Bloomberg saying that he felt good basically about how the deal was progressing, and in the same week that the deal was approved by the Saudi Arabian regulators for whatever that is worth as well. Lewis, do you think there's much here?
Honestly, not massively, no. I like that our competition watchdog or whatever are doing this, that they are actually paying attention to this to the extent that they maybe will expand their inquiries into it. I don't think they're going to do anything. I almost wouldn't be stunned the way that British institutions are at the moment if they're simply saying this to buy them time until someone bigger tells them what direction to go in here.
Wait until the EU, wait until they do something, then we'll do something.
Yeah, we'll just do whatever the EU didn't do just because that's what we fucking do now. But no, I totally agree with what you said there. Like, this deal is not going to stop. There may be little changes to it, additions to it, whatever. I would still be quite surprised if an official ruling comes down in writing from one of these or all of these bodies around the world saying Call of Duty has to do this, whatever this might be, whether that's stay on all platforms or some other deal, whatever that might be. I would be a little surprised at that just because it feels... I mean, I'm speaking from a position of not really knowing anything, but it feels really unusual that a singular product from a merger like this would be held out separately from everything else. But maybe there'll be enough pressure there and Microsoft may be forced to say publicly enough that that isn't their intention, that becomes the reality. Who knows? But yeah, I don't think anyone should expect this deal to change dramatically in any sense before it goes through.
No, I don't think so either. And anyone who's holding out hope that this deal isn't going to go through off the back of this, I'm sorry, but this deal is definitely going to happen. It might take a little bit longer than we thought. It might be into September because I remember there being rumours that it was supposed to be July, then rumours that it was supposed to be August, and now here we are going into September. But I reckon by the end of the year, this deal will have closed and yeah, the merger will have gone ahead and it will be the biggest deal in video games ever. And I don't think that's stopping. Alright, let's finish off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1, Immortality, the new game from Sam Barlow of Her Story and Telling Lies fame, has reviewed extremely well. It's currently sitting with a 90 on PC and a 92 on Series X. The game seems to have gone down an absolute storm with reviewers. It very much seems to be in the same sort of vein as Her Story and Telling Lies in that it's a FMV-based puzzle game, basically. And people have responded really positively to it. Lewis, I know you were particularly interested in this one.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I am very excited about this. Really, really pleased to see the broad response that it's been getting. I had noticed that the magazine Edge had given it a 10 out of 10. I think that they were the first ones to review just because of their kind of print publishing schedule or whatever. They gave it a rare 10 out of 10. I think that's their like 11th perfect score ever in their history, something like that. Yeah, so it's as rare as like the IGN one used to be at one point maybe, but that told me that it was going to be something quite special. And the reviews that have come in since have kind of all matched that. It does look and sound quite a lot like more Telling Lies and Her Story, but that is fine by me because those games were phenomenal.
Well, I have to say, I much preferred Her Story to Telling Lies. So while those might sound the same, to me I had quite different experiences playing it, and it sounds as though this one has just went way beyond the scope of those two games, basically.
Yeah, I just meant in terms of the mechanics and the ideas and stuff like that, like using this FMV stuff to build it. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's on Game Pass day one. I'm going to be playing it pretty soon, I hope, to be honest, because it's rocketed right up to the top. It's kind of crept up, it felt like to me. Like, obviously we knew it was coming, but there hasn't been a lot of like preview buzz around it or whatever, and then suddenly in the last like week or two it's just kind of been like, oh shit, it's here, it's coming. coming, and now, you know, these amazing reviews are out. So yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, I have to admit, Lewis, unless you'd been telling me about it, I would have not known that this game was coming as soon as it was. And now these review scores are absolutely incredible. Yes, I am very, very, very interested in playing this myself. Alright, let's shout out number 2, and Saints Row came out actually last week, although we were doing our Gamescom special last week, so we never got to talk about it. But that has reviewed a lot less well, Lewis, a lot less well. Currently sitting with a pretty poor 63 on PlayStation 5 and a 67 on PC and Series X. I mean, it's a poor result with all the will in the world, Lewis, I think it's fair to say. The game seems to be buggy as hell, but more to the point, it sounds like the game is just really quite boring and unfun and repetitive, and for a game like that they need to be ramping up the fun dial as far as it can fucking go, right? That's where it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be over the top, unbridled fun. Yeah, it's a real shame. I know a lot of people were really excited about this reboot of the series, fans of the original series, but this seems like a massive swing and a miss.
Definitely, yeah. I don't think there's too much more needs to be said about Saints Row. There was so much on the internet last week. Oh my god. Yeah, disappointing if you're a fan of that series, but I don't think this is the one. By all means, check it out if you're a big fan and you want to see it, but it's not looking good. It's not looking great. This strikes me as something that could appear on Games Pass pretty bloody soon, if I'm honest. That's true, yeah. Alright, let's shout out number 3. For about an hour, everyone in the world thought that Amazon were going to buy EA, and the world went absolutely mad. The news came from GLHF, which is a Swedish media group who published the news on USA Today, which said that an announcement was imminent that Amazon were going to buy EA. However, CNBC, citing their own sources, basically took the piss out of them live on air and confirmed that it wasn't happening, and USA Today eventually had to retract the article. However, Lewis, EA have been looking to sell, it seems, for quite a while. There have been rumours since even before the Activision deal. And while CNBC, the guys on there, did say that this was not a no smoke without fire situation, they were just saying that that report was flat out wrong. What are your thoughts here, Lewis? I mean, a bit of a shambles of a situation, really, eh?
Some bad reporting, man. Bad reporting.
I mean, the reason that USA Today said that they kind of retracted the article later was that it hadn't met their editorial standards around, like, citing sources and vetting sources. But, I mean, I have no idea if they did that or not, or if that source just turned out to be kind of not viable or whatever. No idea. Don't know enough about the Swedish company behind all this. It was funny to watch the way that they were kind of laughing about it on the news.
It was quite unprofessional.
It was quite unprofessional, yeah. I mean, and that's it's not like they've never reported on stories that turned out to be false almost every day for their entire careers. But also, you know, like, this could still happen. It could just be that no one else is confirming it at the moment or whatever. So, but overall, looking at the whole picture, Jesus Christ, that did feel like a massive announcement. And me and you were talking in that hour about how it seemed like we were heading towards a world where there would just kind of be like 2 or 3 publishers and then a sort of sea of indies under them, essentially, with the major media companies just taking over everything. So, I mean, no love for EA, but I still don't want that to happen.
No. I mean, no love for EA either, but I also don't want that to happen. And that brings us on nicely to shout out number 4 off the back of that. Bandai Namco have said that they are trying to secure IP and partnerships amid this spree of acquisitions. They have said that they and other smaller publishers have been hit by the recent acquisitions, saying that it limits their capacity to work with major developers. And in securing partnerships in IP, they are hoping to secure their own future, basically. Now, I would personally say that Bandai Namco are, all things considered, still a pretty major publisher, Lewis. So imagine what industry consolidation is doing to publishers even much smaller than them, you know?
Yep, scary time to be in the business altogether. A scary, uncertain time. Probably quite an exciting time as well for some people who stand to make a lot of money out of these sales and stuff. But yeah, the fact that Bandai Namco, who released Elden Ring this year, bear that in mind.
Exactly, yeah.
It sold 16 million copies in 4 months. You know, they are nervous about their IP and their position. That is a scary place to be in.
It definitely is. And on that somber note, Liz, I think it is time for a beer, and then we will be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our play-along of The Floor is Jelly and The Enigma Machine.
It is indeed, Mark. Yeah, so again, these are 2 games that we've drawn out of the itch.io bundle for abortion funds, which was kind of announced and released in the wake of the Roe v. Wade injustice, quite frankly. So this is kind of continuing our recent series of taking a couple of these like much smaller games from these itch.io bundles and playing them and just kind of getting a sense of what indie development at that scale is doing and what kinds of ideas and stuff it can bring to the fore. We've had a good range of games so far. I think we were both saying before that this month's selection, the Flourish Jelly and the Enigma Machine, are probably about as varied from one another as we've done thus far. Particularly, I guess, because in its purest forms, the Flourish Jelly is very much like a gameplay game, and the Enigma Machine is very much a sort of story and ideas game, and that's a wee bit different from the other ones that we've done so far. We both played the Flourish Jelly first, right? You played the Flourish Jelly first as well?
We did.
So we're going to start there. The Flourish Jelly was released in 2014, developed and published by Oren Snyder. I believe it was just a solo project, but apologies to anyone else who did work on that game whose name escapes me now. This is, for anyone who didn't play it, it is basically a kind of physics-based puzzle platformer. It is very, very similar to games. To my mind, the most obvious comparison is actually Super Meat Boy, but it's got elements of more precise platformers like Celeste, but obviously on a much kind of smaller scale than that. But the key, if you haven't worked it out yet, the key difference here is that the floor and the walls are made of jelly.
The jelly on the list. That's
Fancy
the thing.
And so, yeah, essentially what this does is creates different ways of solving pretty standard puzzle platforming puzzles, really. You know, it's about using the bounce that you can get, the extra height and the extra distance that you can get to get through difficult spaces and that kind of thing. Not an especially challenging game, I didn't think. You know, when I'm drawing comparisons to things like Celeste and Super Meat Boy, both of which you've played. I never played much of Super Meat Boy, but you played a lot of that, eh? A couple of things to dive into here. Obviously, gameplay wise, I think this is pretty basic in a lot of ways. The platforming feel I thought was decent in terms of like that kind of jump feel, but obviously the physics behind it all is the thing that kind of changes how this game feels in comparison to other platformers. What did you think of actually playing it? What was your kind of takeaway there?
Honestly, my main feeling playing this game was usually frustration. And not always in a Celeste sort of happy frustration sort of way. Like, there was elements of this game which I did find immensely frustrating. As you said, it was supposed to be a puzzle platformer. Actually, I think that a lot of the puzzle design, there's a lot about the level designs and stuff like that I really, really liked. I thought that a lot of them were very cleverly made.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, if you're going to be a puzzle platformer, I would actually compare this a lot closer to Ori. And the reason that I say that is because it has quite loose, floaty mechanics. And if you're going to be a precision platformer with loose, floaty mechanics, you have to be as good as Mario, or else it's really, really going to struggle, I think. And I found the mechanics actually immensely frustrating quite a lot of the time, is what I would say. That might just be a me problem. I'm not trying to have a go at the developer or whatever. It very much seems as though the developer was just sort of playing around with different mechanics and stuff like that. And if this is a solo developer, it's still a fucking impressive game for only one dude, I've got to say. But yeah, I was quite frustrated by it, Lewis, if I'm completely honest with you.
I mean, I to lay my cards out on the table, yeah, I was a bit frustrated by this as well. I definitely liked the first portion, the first maybe hour or so, a lot more than the end.
Agreed.
I did think, yeah, what started off as like just a really nice, simple idea was kind of stretched to its, to be honest, beyond its limits. I thought, you know, there was, by the end, you just kind of felt like you'd had enough. In that, what is a simple, straightforward idea in that it's just like any other puzzle platformer, except the jumps work slightly differently and you have to kind of negotiate that. I actually didn't mind that floatiness at the beginning of the game because it felt like part of it. And there's actually a section quite near the end which feels almost like a kind of anti-grav space where everything is a lot floatier, which I was also totally okay with, but everything in between,
actually that was better than the original.
It felt more kind of deliberate or something, and like you could, I don't know, map out your long distance jumps a wee bit more easily. But yeah, like I thought the beginning platforming wise was totally fine. By the end I felt like the game kind of ran out of steam and ran out of ideas, and was just going through the motions a little bit of like how to wrap up a platforming game that doesn't really have much of a story.
Yeah, I have to admit, there was these sort of terminals in the game that you could press down when you were sort of inside them. There was like a wee house sort of thing. And I think that they basically delivered story to you. But I didn't even realise that you could interact with them until the very, very last one that I got to. And I don't know if we missed out on a bit of story or whatever, but the one that I did read was like getting quite existential on what was quite a simple game with a simple premise, do you know what I mean? And then the way that the game ends, which is sort of the game itself like sort of starts to break down and all the mechanics go away to fuck, and then it's all glitchy and whatever. I don't know, I think it was trying to be a greater thing than it actually ended up being. Do you know what I mean? I think that if it had stuck to being like a cool platformer with like an interesting mechanic, and it just had some sort of simple through line, like, I don't know, Save the Princess or whatever, relatively simple storyline, just to wrap it all together, that would have been better for me, actually, if it was just quite straightforward. It was just this fun mechanic that we were playing with, and that's all it had to be, you know what I mean? That's all it had to be.
I agree 100% with everything that you said there. Like, this is a game that is kind of, you know, visually charming. Like you say, the environments, the levels themselves, the puzzles, how those are laid out, that's all well done enough by and large, but it felt like a game that by the end wanted to have something to say, but hadn't set any of that up. And these terminals, like you're saying, that do seem to deliver a bit of story, I basically missed all of them. I caught a couple towards the end.
I think I got 4.
Yeah,
I think I interacted with 1.
I think I got 3 and interacted with those, and then was just like, yeah, I can't be bothered looking for these, because they're pretty well hidden at times as well. Like, you have to, there's 31 of them, so if you're saying you got 4 or whatever, yeah, there's 31 of them. Yeah,
holy shit, I did not realise that.
Yeah, 31. I got 2 or 3, and I was just like, this is not interesting enough to put the effort in to find these things. And there's nothing else in the game about it. There's no seeding of it. There's no, I mean, we have not said the character's name or anything about the character, because you don't have a character really. You've got a little blob guy who can jump about.
No, that's it. Like, what is actually happening on screen and what that story appeared to be trying to do were quite disparate. There was a real dissonance between that, you know, and unfortunately that is where the game fell down. But actually, in its core mechanics, the Flores jelly being the mechanic was sound. Like, totally. It could have been a very simple, fun little game. Like, it didn't have to be greater than that. And to be honest with you, I think if they'd narrowed the scope that way, it would have been a better game.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. It needed the last hour lopped off it, and it needed tightening up a bit. But, you know, otherwise a good like proof of concept for a new kind of type of mission or type of level within a puzzle platformer. You know, you could absolutely add that to any other puzzle game, and it would sit well enough, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Mark, from that to our second game, which is a complete change of pace, the Enigma Machine. I'm kind of keen just to get your overall thoughts first of all. This is self-described as a first-person sci-fi horror puzzle game. It's definitely got elements of the old point-and-click adventure game about it as well, but what was your overall take on this?
This was fantastic. This was right up my street. This was a spectacularly good game, in my opinion. Very, very small. Reminded me a lot of the Black Iris when we played that, although maybe 4 times as long, really. Not just in graphical style, but also a lot in its tone and the atmosphere that it set. When we spoke about the Black Iris, we spoke a lot about how it set its atmosphere, and I thought this game done exactly the same. Old sort of PS1 era graphics, sort of glitchy and creepy towards the end of it as well. Basically, the story is that you're supposed to be decontaminating or practicing to decontaminate an AI, but it becomes apparent quite early on that you're actually not practicing. You really are decontaminating the AI that you're interacting with, which is just a little console computer. And I think that the game is clever, or respects the player enough to let them know during the sort of end part of the game, when the AI then knows that it is not a fake decontamination thing, like the AI is going to die basically at the end of the story, the developer respects the player enough to assume that they've already worked that out, sort of thing, by saying things like, oh, you already worked that out, or you didn't even hesitate to kill me and whatever, and blah 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 blah. There was just a lot of nice little narrative touches throughout this that really played well as a video game, but just like was well written as well, just bottom line.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really vibed with me. Very sci-fi, involved androids and shit. It was way up my street, man.
Yeah, when I started playing it, I did about 5 minutes and think Mark is going to love this when he gets to it, and
he did.
Yeah, honestly, I really, really enjoyed this as well. It is not necessarily ticking all the boxes for me in terms of the stuff that I'm interested in, and I did think actually story-wise, actually what you said there is really interesting, because it felt a wee bit predictable to me in terms of like, you know, it's a rogue AI, it is essentially having an existential crisis, and it wants to not be killed by you, even though it knows that that's what's going on. That, like, this has all been done a million times. It reminded me of plenty of other video games I've played, never mind films and all that kind of stuff. But as you said, it is also all done in a way where it's like the game recognises that you have also known this. It doesn't try to be like, oh my god, what a twist. Yeah. It turns out actually this AI's mind that you were in the whole time is a real AI's mind. You know, it treats you with more respect than that. But also, man, that art style and that atmosphere and that sound design, that oppressive,
never mentioned the sound.
Scratchy, glitchy. So the whole thing has this kind of like old 80s computer kind of visuals to it, but also a sort of VHS texturing over it. So like if you are our age or older, you're going to kind of get a kick out of that. I mean, even the music on the startup, when you're kind of talking to the computer before anything really has happened, you're telling it your name and stuff, has this kind of just weird like 80s American breakfast TV show music about it that I was just immediately like, oh fuck, we're in for something real weird here. And like as the game progresses and you start to, essentially, like talking about the structure of it, it progresses in the form of sort of 3 puzzles. Essentially, you're trying to find codes to type into the computer by interacting with these environments, which are at first presented to you as being distinct levels, but over time you realise that they're interconnected in really interesting ways. Won't spoil too much about this, but so yeah, as you go forward and you're unlocking things and you get more and more memories from Demos, the computer that you're talking to, it is obviously having a bad time. and by the end, so are you, effectively, because everything, like the way it uses the graphical style in particular in that last kind of half an hour of the game, where what has always been really rudimentary sort of
PS1 era graphics.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's got that style about it. It does look a lot like the Black Iris, but suddenly everything just starts to like melt and fall apart and push into one another. Suddenly a slope that you're walking on becomes a wall, becomes a door, becomes actually the pathway that you were looking for in the first place. Like, and it can feel overwhelming at times. That at the end, like the sensory overload in that last half an hour, I thought was really quite effective.
It is deeply unsettling, and that's exactly what they were trying to do. Do you know what I mean? Like they totally nailed that. There was a couple of bits that actually, well, specifically when things really start to break down, something happens, which again I won't spoil because I do genuinely think that everyone listening to this should go and play this. Like, it is no money at all if you've already got one of these bundles, and it's very, very cheap on
it's like a $5 max
Steam.
On
it's on Switch as well. I think it's on PlayStation. It's a 2-hour experience and it's fantastic as far as I'm concerned, so I do recommend people go and play it. But there is a point in there where I genuinely like jumped out of my skin. It wasn't like a jump scare moment necessarily, but it was incredibly frightening in that moment because it was just not something that you expected to happen given the rest of the game sort of thing. But in terms of the art style and whatever, when things do start to like get all like glitchy and weird at the end, because basically you're supposed to be walking around the AI's mind, it all starts like going glitchy and weird and freaking the fuck out, and it is deeply unsettling. And again, as we were talking about with the Black Iris, just drawing the comparison back to that again, like that mood set and that atmosphere was incredible. It was so good. And the puzzles like are pretty straightforward in reality, but that isn't what the game is. Do you know what I mean? The game is the narrative and the atmosphere that they've created in the game, and it really is something very, very good. Like, I would love to see a 10-hour version of that game. You know?
Oh yeah,
it would be so good.
Do you know, I kept thinking that all the way through as well, because the narrative framing here is that you are essentially supposed to be testing a product that isn't yet on the market. So that this
exactly, yeah,
and almost sort of interviewing for a job that doesn't exist yet in terms of going in to decontaminate these AI minds, and that, you know, that unfolds in all sorts of different ways. But they keep saying things all the way through the game that's kind of like, well, just wait for the full product launch, or like, you know, our upgraded version Helos is coming soon. And I was like, is this actually like, is this effectively a demo for another thing? Kind of like the Black Iris has become the underpinnings for that guy's next game. I mean, I know that Jamie Gavin, the developer here, is kind of goes under Enigma Studio. He's had a couple of other games since this. The Enigma Machine released in 2018. I think he's had 2 games since then. Definitely keen to go and look them up as well. But as far as I know, they're not directly connected to this. But I totally agree. Like a bigger, I mean, you could do a double or a triple A version of this idea really and just kind of really flesh it out. But this in its current form, this 2-hour just mood piece, I thought was fantastic. Like, I usually don't like a game like this where you are deliberately very stressed out, and that last kind of half an hour or so is very stressful, and it does things, again, won't spoil it, but we kind of said to each other, it does things in that part of the game that you almost now expect that it wouldn't do, because there's been loads of games, there's been loads of walk-in sims that make you feel a certain way and don't pull the trigger, and this one kind of does in an interesting way.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah. We're both dancing around stuff here because I do think genuinely a lot of people should go and check this out. 2 hours long, just very stylish, very well put together, and I think, I mean, we don't have time to go in any depth, but I think the writing is also fantastic. Like the actual,
genuinely
the
fantastic
character to character dialogue from the computer to yourself, and the things that you then ask it back and all that. I think it's very, very well done. Yeah, I loved it. It's of these kind of 6 games of this kind of size that we've played recently, it's definitely up there as one of my favourite, I think.
No, definitely, I would absolutely agree. And once again, it just shows you that game development at this scale can be exceptional, do you know what I mean, and so creative, and just something that, although you're saying this could be like expanded out to be AAA, and I'm sure that it probably could be in terms of its concept, but there is something quite special about it just being that size and
doing it in that
just
way.
This amazing proof of concept, as you said, this sort of just small experience that is absolutely fantastic, and it just makes you wonder of the thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions, I don't even know, of games on itch.io. Like, how many things like this are out there that we will never play, and so many people will never play just because of the size of it. But despite that, I'm just so glad that it exists. It's a fantastic thing, it really is. And I think that we have to commit, Luce, that in future play-along games, future years of the PlayersToo podcast, we need to do more itch.io games.
Definitely,
this
absolutely.
Absolutely great.
Really fantastic, yeah. Well done to all the developers for the games that we've done in this wee strand. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, incredible from solo developers to even like small teams and whatever. Like, it's fantastic. I love games at this scale. I really, really do, and I want to play more of them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. All right, well, it's time to announce our new play-along game for this month, and it's Inscryption, the sort of scary deck builder thing. You've already started playing it, so you can tell us.
yeah, scary deck builder is not a million miles off. Yeah, this is a fantastic little indie game that came out, I think, in a year or two ago now. It is what on the surface looks like a deck builder, a card game, but it is not that. There's quite a lot else going on. So much so that simply hitting down on the right stick will remove you from the table that you're playing the card game at, and there lies the rest of the game. And that's all I'll say about that for now. As you say, I've already started it. I have put it down for the last few weeks just because I was making a start on Nier and various other things, so I'll kind of be going back to it for this. But what I had played already, which was maybe the first couple of hours, was really fun. I think you'll get a kick from it. Although card games are card games, Mark, that could be a hill to overcome.
I don't mind card games, man. It's you that doesn't like card games. I'm all about card games. I'm fine with card games. No, genuinely, like I'm very excited to play this. It's been on the list for a long, long time. When it first came out, it made a real
critically adored
splash. It was really critically adored, and since then I've always been interested in playing it. So this is a fantastic excuse. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and with that, we will see you next week.
Thanks.